Princess Anne just helped Prince William pull off something that had been 25 years in the making, and the fallout inside the ancient stone walls of Windsor Castle was so immediate, so volatile, and so intense that Queen Camilla was reportedly left completely gobsmacked, running straight to King Charles demanding he fix it, only to realize she had absolutely no power to stop it. That is the incredible high-stakes institutional crisis we are breaking down today. Because when you actually look at what was said versus what just happened behind closed doors, the timeline reveals a deep family wound that never truly healed, and a brilliant plan that was executed with absolute surgical precision. Before we get into the terrifying details of this historic palace showdown, make sure to subscribe to Crown Watch right now so you don't miss any exclusive updates on stories just like this. What just transpired inside the guarded perimeter of Windsor Castle is the exact definitive moment royal commentators have been waiting a quarter of a century to talk about. William has finally done it. Fueled by years of silent, burning rage, he pulled Princess Diana's official portrait out of the dark, dusty storage room it had been shamefully buried in for decades, and placed it exactly where it belongs, right beside Queen Elizabeth on the Sacred Hall of Matriarchs wall. Camilla had absolutely no idea it was coming. When she walked into the gallery and saw it, she was completely paralyzed with shock. She ran straight to Charles, screaming and ordering him to have it ripped down immediately. But what Charles did next turned the entire palace upside down and signaled a permanent shift in the monarchy. To understand why this situation escalated with such terrifying speed, you have to understand the history of the wound that never healed. There is a magnificent, deeply personal portrait of Princess Diana that most ordinary people have never been allowed to see up close. And the story of where that specific painting has been sitting for the last 25 years will make your stomach drop. The portrait was originally painted during one of the most celebrated, radiant periods of Diana's public life. She was at the absolute height of everything. Her beauty, her warmth, and the unique, magical way she made ordinary people feel seen and loved in a way no royal had ever managed before. People who were present in the room when Diana first saw the finished portrait say she stood in front of it for a very long time without speaking a single word. It was the way you go completely quiet when a piece of art captures exactly who you are inside. That portrait was officially supposed to hang in the iconic Hall of Matriarchs at Windsor Castle. This is universally understood as the most sacred ceremonial space in the entire royal residence. A historic wall reserved exclusively for the most important, influential women in the history of the British monarchy. Tragically, Diana never got to see it hung there. She died before it could happen, and almost immediately after she passed away, the portrait was quietly, methodically removed from institutional consideration, wrapped up tightly in protective plastic, and placed deep inside palace storage, where it sat alone in the dark for over 2 decades. When Diana died in August 1997, the world grieved openly, loudly, and with unprecedented emotion. But inside the palace, something else was happening, something much quieter, colder, and far uglier. Within hours of Diana's tragic death being confirmed in Paris, the very first internal calls made from inside the palace were not calls of grief or family comfort. Royal insiders report that among the very first urgent concerns raised by senior staff was whether Diana had any priceless crown jewelry in her possession at the Ritz Hotel. The frantic scramble to reclaim royal property began before the British public had even been told their beloved princess was officially gone. And while that cold administrative machine was moving, Camilla was already making her own calculations. Camilla had spent years as the hidden woman, the mistress Charles visited in secret while married to Diana. The exact woman Diana had famously called the Rottweiler in private, because she understood with agonizing clarity what this individual was doing to her marriage and her mental health. Now, Diana was suddenly gone, and Camilla began moving through the private palace rooms Diana had once called home. She did not simply move in, she systematically erased her predecessor. Diana had kept fresh, vibrant flowers throughout the palace spaces she lived in, beautiful arrangements she had personally chosen every week. Camilla ordered them removed and burned. Not replaced, but burned to ashes. The historic bedroom Diana had slept in, the private room where she had held her boys and cried alone at night, was ordered by Camilla to be locked permanently. She did not want to sleep there herself, but she also made sure nobody else ever would, sealing it away like something deeply shameful. Diana's personal items were boxed up and relocated to distant estates. Her image began completely disappearing from the most prominent ceremonial spaces inside the royal residences, and the Hall of Matriarchs at Windsor, that sacred wall of honor, never received Diana's portrait at all. For over 20 years, the most beloved royal woman of the modern era was missing from her own family's wall because one woman found her memory completely uncomfortable. Prince William was only 15 years old when he was forced to walk behind his mother's coffin through the weeping streets of London. He walked in absolute silence, a young child wearing a tailored suit in front of the entire world, keeping his face completely still. He was a child who already knew the devastating truth that his father had been having a passionate affair with another woman for years. Diana had sat him down and told him herself, explaining that there were 3 people in their marriage, and that was the core reason the family had broken apart. His younger brother, Harry, found out in an even more heartbreaking way. He was watching a live television debate about the future of the monarchy with Diana when Camilla's name suddenly flashed across the screen. He turned to his mother and innocently asked who that woman was, forcing Diana to explain the painful reality to her youngest son with absolutely no preparation. But the most devastating thing William would ever learn about what was truly done to his mother came from a secret letter written in 1995, just 2 years before her death. Diana wrote a private note to her solicitor, Lord Mishcon, stating explicitly that she believed Charles was planning to have her killed in a staged car accident, specifically involving brake failure and a serious head injury, so that he would be completely free to move on. She wrote that her husband was planning an accident in her car, and that Camilla was nothing but a calculated decoy being used by the system. 2 years after writing those terrifying words, Diana died in a violent car crash inside a dark Paris tunnel. That chilling note was handed to the police immediately after her death, but it sat untouched in a vault for 6 long years before finally reaching Scotland Yard. William and Harry did not know the full unredacted contents of that letter for years. When William finally understood what his mother had written in the final years of her life, and then looked at what Camilla had done to her memory inside the palace walls after her death, something inside the future king hardened completely. It never softened again. He watched Camilla move through the rooms his mother had lived in. He watched her remove her portraits, and he watched the Hall of Matriarchs stand empty, where Diana should have been honored. He kept his face completely still in public, but the anger was eating him alive on the inside. At 16, he finally broke. He pulled aside a close, trusted confidant and let it all out, stating that Camilla had gotten her claws into his father and would never let go. He believed that was the ultimate reason his mother was dead, because Diana had been driven out of her own family, stripped of her security, and pushed out until she ended up completely alone and unprotected in a Paris tunnel in the middle of the night. A 16-year-old boy carried those heavy words for 25 years. But there was one other powerful person in this family carrying a wound connected to Camilla that ran even deeper than William's, and it started long before Diana ever entered the picture. That person was Princess Anne. Before Camilla married Andrew Parker Bowles, Andrew was actually in a serious, romantic relationship with Princess Anne. They were close enough that a royal marriage was actively being discussed behind closed doors. However, the rigid royal family structure shut it down completely because Andrew was a devout Catholic, and Anne, as a senior member of the Church of England, was not permitted to marry him at the time. She stepped aside because she had no choice, and within a very short period, Camilla moved in and Andrew proposed to her. Anne was forced to sit in the pews at their wedding in 1973, watching the man she loved marry someone else. The woman who took the man Anne was supposed to marry then spent the next several decades as a secret mistress who destroyed her brother's marriage, broke Diana into pieces, and eventually walked into Buckingham Palace wearing a crown. Royal authors report that Camilla was deeply, intensely by Princess Anne for years, finding Anne's cold, no-nonsense behavior toward her extremely nerve-wracking. After the 2023 coronation, Anne reportedly confronted Camilla at a private family luncheon, looked her dead in the eye, and told her directly, "You are not the queen. You are just the king's wife." Anne has allegedly never once bowed to Camilla, having personally requested permission from Queen Elizabeth years ago to be entirely exempt from that protocol. Anne watched Diana be erased. She watched the portrait disappear, and she carried every single piece of that fury until the timing was perfect. Both Anne and William wanted one thing: to return Diana to the Hall of Matriarchs. Then came the night when the waiting was finally over. William had spent years preparing this high-stakes move, holding careful meetings with curators about portrait placement protocol and studying historical records going back decades. He made sure every single institutional rule was followed perfectly, so that once the restoration happened, nobody on earth could legally challenge it or reverse it. He had been playing a 25-year chess game inside his own family, and this was his final checkmate. The night before it happened, William called Princess Anne. The call was short and intensely focused. "I cannot wait to see the look on her face. It is long overdue. Diana deserves to come home," Anne said. "She comes home tomorrow," William responded. That was it. The call ended. Camilla had absolutely no idea what was coming for her. The next morning, William's team deliberately scheduled Camilla for an official engagement far outside London, a calculated move to get her completely out of the building and keep her away until the installation was entirely irreversible. While she was gone, the Hall of Matriarchs at Windsor was closed to all public visitors and staff, except for a handful of personally vetted individuals who understood the historical gravity of what they were doing. Nothing appeared on the official royal diary, and no press release was prepared. It happened in total, powerful silence. In the early evening hours, the hidden portrait of Princess Diana was carefully carried into the gallery. The protective wrapping came off slowly, and for the first time in more than 2 decades, Diana's stunning face was fully visible inside Windsor Castle. Princess Anne was there personally, refusing to let anyone else oversee the exact placement. Within 90 minutes, Diana was securely on the wall, placed directly beside the late Queen Elizabeth. 2 iconic women side by side, one who reigned gloriously for 70 years, and one who never had the chance to reign at all. Multiple witnesses reported that the room went completely silent after it was done. Nobody spoke for a long moment. And then Princess Anne, carrying 50 years of personal history, grief and fury, whispered quietly to herself, "Diana belongs here. She always did." Just the raw truth spoken out loud, in a room that had been silent for 25 years.